Is Ukraine driving Russia back across the front line? But is American support for Ukraine starting to slip? And do we finally get an inside perspective over Russia's brutal Storm Z units? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's October 3rd, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. First, as always, guys, thank you so much to everybody that supported me. It seems like the Russian hackers have backed off of my channel, probably because the level of attention was just a little uncomfortable for them. But it looks like they've moved on to other Ukraine content creators who've reached out and said that they are now being attacked by the exact same compromised YouTube content ID account. So I'm working with them to try to come up with a coordinated response. Again, I don't want this to be something where, oh, it's not my problem. I don't have to worry about it because as long as this account is allowed to harass and silence Ukraine content creators, all of us are at risk, right? I'm sure they have a short list, and I'm sure they will cycle back to me if they're allowed to continue. So thanks again to everybody that supported me on Combat Vet News, everybody that tweeted hashtag content ID hack at YouTube. You know, it seems that the attention they've gotten really is starting to get to the hackers. And again, I know that ATP Geopolitics is one channel that has been public, but others have reached out to me privately and have said that they are also subject to this same harassment. So anyway, we're actually going to be dropping a new video on Combat Vet News today. If you haven't already become a member, it's the best way to support the channel. And the best part of it is that I own every aspect of this site. If you want to copyright claim it, you'll have to send me, you'll have to take me to US court, which of course the Russian hackers will avoid doing at all cost. So again, I've got all my YouTube videos on here for free, but if you become a member, you can get access to the premium content, uncensored combat footage coming to us from the front lines. We do a deep dive analysis of all of it, figuring out where it's taking place and what it can tell us about the real state of fighting on the front lines. And thanks again, tremendously to everyone who supported me over on Combat Vet News. It means the world to me and my family that you guys show up when when the Russians come after me. All right. Enough about that. Let's talk about the real fight, the real warriors here, the Ukrainian armed forces. As you can see, outside of Robtina and Novoprokopivka, it looks like additional parts of the northern section of this town are now listed as contested. You can see Russia relying on a series of motorized rifle regiments to try to defend it, as well as a bar squad. But some of these regiments, you might notice these are somewhat different regiments we've seen in the past defending this area. It seems like Russia's trying to establish some kind of troop rotation. If stories are to be believed, it's because this segment outside of Novoprokopivka is just one of the most attritional areas where Russian forces can fight. And you can see that they are being driven back, and that it looks increasingly like Novoprokopivka is going to be occupied by Ukrainian armed forces. Moving over to Andriivka, I thought this was pretty interesting. You can see here that many of this key western windbreak here is now listed as controlled by Ukrainian armed forces. So in terms of the actual square footage change, it looks small, but don't kid yourself. This is very significant that Ukrainian armed forces now control half of Russia's primary defensive line. As we've talked about, holding this rail line is key to Russia maintaining an efficient defense. If Ukraine can get past this rail line, Russian forces, you can see they're just so sparse in terms of their defensive areas, right? There's just very little for them to use as a strong point, right? They're going to have to pull all the way back to Odradivka and probably use this line here as a defensive point, right? Probably occupying strong points along this line here, but it's just going to be very hard for them to hold some of this territory. likewise, Ukrainian armed forces are going to have to cross some open terrain here, but they'll be doing so from a much stronger position if they can occupy this entire windbreak and support any infantry or armored forces that are going to be on the attack. So I think if you're Russia, you're probably in a little bit of a panic mode right now, seeing these advances into this key terrain. The only other changes, let's see if I can find it here. I think it's actually down here near a place called Novelsky. You can see here that this was listed as contested and is now actually listed as liberated, right? It seems like Russian forces have lost their appetite to defend this chunk of territory outside of Novelsky. Is it super significant? Not really. It's some windbreaks. It includes this low ground in this river area here, but it's not a game changer. But what is worth noting is that, again, you see Russian forces yielding more terrain and being unwilling or unable to contest more portions of the battlefield across in a sector where we've seen a lot of Russian offensive activity, right? When we look over at the combat map, you can see Russian forces launching 35 offensive actions, including efforts, it looks like, to retake this Novelsky area near Andriivka, counterattacking in and around this Staromayorsk region, as well as inside the salient of Verbova and Robtina. So all in all, a pretty positive sign, as well as you can see a Russian MiG-20 or a Ukrainian MiG-29 taking out a Russian drone, which could be a sign that Ukrainian forces feel comfortable operating fairly close to Russian airspace, that Russian air defenses may be increasingly looking suppressed. But when we look at the Institute for the Study of War updates, not a ton here. Some drama inside Russian mill bloggers about the firing of Mikhail Teplinsky, a general who did the controversial act of rotating brigades that have been ground down, which in Russian military doctrine is apparently highly controversial. But here's the real thing. According to a report from Reuters, finally, their investigative reporters have gotten inside Russia's Storm Z squads. What are Storm Z squads? Well, when Russia and the MOD banned Wagner from recruiting from prisons, it wasn't out of an attempt to improve the quality of the Russian armed forces. It's because the MOD wanted this prison labor for themselves. And the Storm Z that exposes involve just an absolute menagerie of terrible soldiers. Soldiers who are alcoholics or drug users, soldiers who are insubordinate, convicts who are serving time in Russian penal colonies are all thrown into something called Storm Z squads, right? Now, we've talked about Storm Z squads for a while. We've talked about how this Russian tactic has evolved to be a sort of fire support and infantry concept. When they want to launch one of their attacks, they will rely on Russian artillery, thermobaric rockets, even some of their indirect fire and tanks to suppress enemy forces. But then they send low-skill infantry to conduct frontal assaults of these positions. And basically, either Russian forces successfully suppress Ukrainian defenses, and these light infantry can get in and sort of mop up, or Russian artillery fails to suppress the Ukrainian forces, in which case these low-skill light infantry conducting a frontal assault against a dug-in enemy position goes about as well as you'd think. According to this article, one fighter said that there were only 15 of the 120 men in his original unit were either KIA or WIA, and that's just in the fighting in Bakhmut in June. So a sign that that this attrition rate is extremely high. And like we said, we already reviewed the Russian assault detachment doctrine, and you see the Storm Z units fit squarely into that. 100 to 150 men in each company, right? Or in their assault companies. exactly what the doctrine book said, exactly taken from Wagner's playbook, supported again by Russian active duty MOD troops. Of course, these squads aren't taking this sort of terrible treatment lying down. In one recent viral video, these squads have actually refused to conduct combat missions, reporting that often they're wounded or injured, are simply not treated. They are left on the battlefield. They are not CASEVAC'd. They are, the Russian MOD protects its own troops, and they view them more as expendable expendable infantry, something closer to a tool than an actual uniformed soldier. As a result of this, of course, casualty rates are through the roof. Their missions are often preposterous and ineffective. As you can see, right? Imagine being one of the soldiers launching these sort of attacks in Andriivka. We've seen Russia make no measurable gains in territory in this region. In fact, as discussed, we saw them lose territory. Imagine being one of the Storm Z units just conducting assault after assault for no measurable gain, just absorbing Ukrainian munitions. It sounds like, honestly, the word nightmarish appears in the article, and I think that's an apt characterization of what they are describing. Russia pretends its Storm Z units exist, but they won't say how they're manned, though some units pretend that literally Storm Z units don't even exist within their formations. They're not given actual military regiments. For example, as we see here, right, you could be the 4th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, 57th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, 102nd, 11th Separate Assault Brigade. Instead, these Storm Z units, in order to preserve their total anonymity, they're simply unit numbers, simply a 5-digit unit. 40318 is one unit that's whose soldiers were interviewed in this article. But there's others, right? There are other of these anonymous sounding 5-digit units. Just a real sign that this is a, 4318 is maybe it's the only unit they interviewed here. No, here we go. 22179, right? These are just anonymous, disposable units. The other big piece of news is that it appears that the U.S. public is somewhat more split on funding Ukraine than they have been in the past. Now, funding Ukraine is still very popular. A poll found that even among conservatives, 62% said the U.S. is doing too much to support Ukraine. But according to an ABC News poll, 41% of respondents said the U.S. is spending too much aid to Ukraine. 31% said it's the right amount, and 18% said too little is being sent. So still an almost 60-40 split in favor of Ukraine aid, but a increasingly partisan issue among voters. And if there's one thing we know about U.S. politics, it's that majority opinion has only a light influence on actual policymaking. As we know, right, majorities of Americans support things like lower prescription drug costs, improved improved access to things like abortion by almost 70-30. But it doesn't really impact the actual policy making that happens in a lot of states. So I wouldn't put too much stock in this. And at least there is still a healthy majority of Americans that support, Ukrainian aid, military aid to Ukraine. So anyway, guys, that's really all I had for you. Thank you so much to all of our Colonel tier members. I know we need to update this based on all the members who have signed up to support us. We're actually dropping a video today on Combat Vet News. We're going to take a look at some of the combat footage coming out of this fighting. And if you're interested in checking it out, join us on combatvetnews.com, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.